it's Miss Minx, and I'm going to walk you through this Thinking Like a Historian quiz. So it says to read the scenario below carefully and answer the questions by circling the best choice. Underline the clues to help you solve Joe's dilemma. Joe has a dilemma. He thinks he may have found a very important artifact, but he is not sure if he is right. Joe just moved into an old house in Mount Vernon, Virginia. He found a dusty old letter under a floorboard in the dining room. It is addressed to George W. and signed by Martha. Joe thought he remembered that George Washington lived in Mount Vernon at some point in the 1700s. He decided to investigate the old letter to see if it actually belonged to George Washington. The first thing Joe did was to go to the local library. There he found a book written about George Washington, written by an author named Ron Chernow in 2011. In the book, he said that George did live in Mount Vernon from 1761 to 1799. Next, Joe looked online and found a copy of the Journal of Major General George Washington on the National Library for the Study of George Washington's website. In the journal, George mentions a woman named Martha several times. Now the next two questions are going to ask you to decide whether you're looking at a primary source or a secondary source. Remember, primary sources are those from either a first-person account, someone or something that was actually there, such as an artifact or a fossil, a journal, a diary, etc. A secondary source is usually a compilation of sources. So usually it's not first person, so it could be a biography or a documentary, but it wouldn't be written by a person who was actually there. So, number one, the biography about George Washington written by Ron Chernow is an example of a primary source, B, secondary source, or C, tertiary source. We haven't talked about tertiary sources, so you know it's not C. Number two, George Washington's journal is an example of a primary source, B, secondary source, or C, tertiary source. Now in this example, a journal is sort of like a diary. Number three, which of the following is an example of Joe using context or contextualizing to learn more about the letter? Remember, finding out about context is to put that item in a particular time period and find out what was going on in that time period. So, would that be A, he looked online to see how many George W's are listed in Mount Vernon in 2019. B, he read about how men and women courted each other by sending letters in the 1700s. Or C, he showed it to all of his coworkers and got feedback about it. Number four, which is an example of Joe using multi-perspectivity to find out information about the letter? Remember, multi means many and perspectives. So multi-perspectivity means several different viewpoints. So did he A, read all of John Chernow's books about George Washington? B, Joe read books by many authors to gain background information? Or C, Joe read George Washington's journal? So what you're looking for is the option that shows he looked at several different points of view. Number five, which would be a more reliable source about information on George Washington? So reliable would be the most trustworthy. So A, Joe's coworker who watches a History Channel a lot. B, the National Library for the Study of George Washington. Or C, Joe's professor from college who is an expert on bullfrogs. Number 6. Which of the following corroborate Joe's theory that the letter belonged to George Washington? Now remember, to corroborate means to back up a story. A. It is written in blue ink. B. George was married to Martha Washington. Or C. It has an old look to it. Now you are looking for the best possible answer. Joe took the letter to a forensics lab to find out more about it. They told him that they would check the ink and the handwriting to determine the authenticity of the letter. They sent Joe the following results. Ink used, blue ballpoint pen. Handwriting analysis, no match to Martha Washington. Joe was a bit disappointed that the letter wasn't from Martha Washington. He thought that maybe Martha was a very popular name back then. He wondered, did George Washington court more than one woman named Martha? That seemed possible. Upon further investigation, he discovered that ballpoint pens were not invented until 1888. Number 7. Did the lab results corroborate with Joe's theory? So, corroborate in this sentence means, do his results support the theory? A, yes. B, no. Or C, not enough information. So here's the evidence gained from Joe's investigation. So there is a list of evidence, A through G. You need to examine the evidence above to make a claim about Joe's letter. A. George Washington lived in Mount Vernon. B. George Washington married a woman named Martha. C. The letter was written in blue ballpoint pen. D. The letter was found in Mount Vernon. E. The letter was addressed to George W. and signed Martha. F. The letter looks very old. G. The handwriting did not match Martha Washington's. So now for number 8, this is where you read through the evidence to determine which claim you'd like to choose. You can either choose A, Joe's letter once belonged to George Washington, or B, Joe's letter never belonged to George Washington. So you pick either A or B and circle it. Next, for number 9, you pick 2 pieces of evidence from above. So A through G, you look through those and you pick 2 of them and circle 2 to corroborate your claim. So you're going to circle either A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. You pick 2 of them. There can be different combinations of evidence, but only circle 2 letters. Now for the last page, you're using the answers from the previous page to write down your claim, evidence, and reasoning about the source of Joe's letter. Remember, to get full points, you must write down the claim from page 2, your 2 pieces of evidence from page 2, and explain how the evidence supports your claim for your reasoning. So, you literally take your claim from the previous page, so that would be either Joe's letter once belonged to George Washington or Joe's letter never belonged to George Washington. And you write one or the other under your claim. After you do that, you're going to write down the 2 pieces of evidence that you picked on the previous page here under evidence. So you're going to write down the 2 that you circled here. And lastly, you need to write down the reasoning. The reasoning is going to be what connects your evidence to your claim. So you want to mention the evidence and the claim. So an example, and I'm not going to use one from this story, but let's say I found dirty paw prints in the kitchen. And let's say I did an investigation and the evidence I found it's raining outside and one of my dogs has dried mud on its paws, I could make a claim that my dog Ollie tracked mud into my kitchen. So my claim is that the dog tracked mud into the kitchen. My evidence is it's raining outside. There's paw prints, muddy paw prints in my kitchen, and my dog has dried mud on his paws. Now the reasoning would be connecting the evidence to the claim. So it was raining outside, which led to my dog walking in the mud and leaving dirty paw prints on the floor. Therefore, Ollie is responsible for leaving the paw prints. So you're going to want to put your evidence, connect it to your reasoning, or connect it to your claim, and then add that to your reasoning. Okay, I hope this helps.